My name is Brenda Sheik, and today is July 1st, 2014, and we are in Stillwater, Oklahoma, interviewing Bonita Stadler. Did I get that right?
You did.
Stadler?
Stadler, right.
Stadler, S-T-A-D-L-E-R.
Yes, ma'am.
As part of the Voices of Extension Oral History Project. Ms. Stadler is the County Treasurer of Payne County, and so thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to work with you.
Tell me a little bit about your early life. Where were you born and about what time?
About 11 o'clock in the morning.
You knew I wanted the year and I wasn't going to get it. I was trying to
That's right. A while ago. I was born at home, north of Nevina, which no longer exists. It's southwest of Guthrie, and I am the third child. I was a surprise package. My parents had two sons that were almost grown men when I came along. My dad said it was the best surprise he ever had after he got over the initial shock. The initial shock, he said, almost killed him. But many years later, when he lived to be 96 years old, he said, I know now that if we had not had a baby many years ago to help us along, he said we would never live so old, to be so old. So,
kept him young.
Grew up on a farm and ranch, and my dad was a big wheat farmer, farmed wheat and oats, barley, all this sort of thing. Sometimes he'd plant corn, but most of the time would be like mung beans and things like that after the wheat crop was taken off. He did an extensive farming operation and always had cattle. He also traveled with his combine crews from Texas to the Canadian border after he had taken care of our crops and things. So we were always a busy family. Having the brothers that were grown practically when I was born meant that he didn't have any guys to help him except people that he would hire. So I became his driver for getting repairs or hauling wheat, things of that nature, when I was quite young. In fact, long before I had a driver's license. But I was about as tall as I am now, not as large, but as tall. And so it was not uncommon at all for me to be sent to Garber, Oklahoma, or Enid, Oklahoma, or perhaps Mulhall or someplace like that to get repairs when I was 12, alone.
That's a pretty fair distance.
Yes, it is. My mother did not drive. She did not drive a car. She could herd one down the road a little bit, but she really couldn't drive, or didn't have a driver's license. Couldn't drive a tractor, couldn't ride a horse, couldn't milk a cow, although she grew up on one of the most progressive farms in Logan County. She was the baby of 10. So she kind of managed, I think, to have a very luxurious life as a little girl and didn't learn all these things. So it became necessary, if my dad were going to have any help other than hired help, that I kind of fill in. So I was a good helper with my mother in the home. However, she did most of the cooking. I would do cleaning and helping around like that, doing things like mowing the lawns, things of that nature. But as far as cooking, she did most of it, but I watched a lot. And I tell people now I'm considered to be a pretty good cook. And I said, but you know, I watched my mother make hundreds of pies and hot rolls and things like this. And watching is one thing, but you really don't know how to do it till you put your hands in the dough. And that's true of so many things in life. And so, you know, having had the experience of watching and being around things was a big benefit to me.
What were your parents' names?
Arthur and Nellie Green.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Tribble.
Tribble? Can you spell Tribble for us?
Tribble.
And how did your family come to live there?
My mother's family came from Kentucky, and her father was one of several boys, and all of his brothers were doctors. And his theory was, I want to be a farmer. He said, I want to be able to open my mouth as wide as I want to when it comes to selling grain and animals and things of this nature. I don't know exactly what that meant. I guess it meant he would have full control of it. He didn't want to be a doctor. So he and my grandmother came, they homesteaded. And they homesteaded south of Guthrie, sort of south and a little, just south, I think is a better way of describing it, south and west of Guthrie. And they lived there on a homestead for a number of years. Then they moved further south, which put them near Seward, Oklahoma. and that's where my mother was born. And so my mother lived there and went to school at the Novina School, and she became a school teacher. My father came from Mississippi. His family had plantations in Mississippi, but he had come from a family of 21 children, 11 boys and 10 girls. And things became very tense, I think, as time went on, and when he was about 16, he left Mississippi and came to Oklahoma. Worked in various things, from working on the railroad. He worked in the forestry work in Arkansas. He worked for people as a farmhand. He did all these kinds of things till he met my mother at an Epworth League party.
What is an
Epworth League was an organization connected with the Methodist Church.
Can you spell that for us?
I really can't. Epworth League, I don't know. At any rate, he asked one of his brothers, he said, "Who is that cute little girl with the black curly hair and the blue eyes?" And this guy kept telling him, "Her name's Nellie Tribble." Okay, now what'd you say her name was? Nellie Tribble. So after a number of years of dating and him getting enough where he felt like he could support a wife, they were married. And they lived, again, southwest of Guthrie. And he walked past the house that was located on Seward Road, right across from the little town of Novina. And I guess you'd say it was probably the Palace on the Prairie. It had been built by a very successful banker by the name of Canfield. And the Canfields lived there for many years, and this house was quite a structure. It's had a full attic, full bottom attic, or walk-in where you could make a house out of it, a room. And then there was a second floor, first floor, and a full bottom basement with a cellar, a storm cellar, and a place to store your fruits and vegetables and things like that. And my dad would walk past this and he said, "Someday I'm going to own that." And everybody laughed at him. And they said, "Hey, you can even buy a pair of underwear. What do you mean you're going to own that?" And he said, "Hide and watch." He bought it in '45. That's where I grew up. Now, I was born slightly north of Novina, and the house is still there. My mother would not go to the hospital. She said, "I'm not going to the hospital," so I was born at home. My dad always told the story. He said it was a nice day in January. He was out scooping oats. He said, "I was going to sell some oats to pay for you." And the midwife and the doctor said, "I don't think you better leave." So he was on hand when I was born. The doctor said, "Well, how much?" My dad asked the doctor, said, "How much do I owe you?" And he said, "Well, such and such a price," whatever he quoted to him. And he said, "What do you think? Do you think that's worth that much?" And my dad said, "Money could not buy it." So, and then, like I said, in '45, he bought the home where I actually grew up. Mm-hmm. And it's still standing. It has been ravaged by people who have destroyed it. I had hoped someday to make a bed and breakfast out of it. Can't do that. But at any rate, I still have the property, and I do haying there. I grow Bermuda hay and sell Bermuda hay there.
And Novina, was it in Logan County?
Yes.
Okay.
This is all in Logan County. It was a thriving metropolis at one point in time. Had 2 railroads, I think it was 2, maybe, no, it's 2, I think 2 railroads, had several grocery stores, had 3 churches, a large school that went all the way through high school. And as the railroads left, this town just became, less and less. And eventually there's nothing left of it. I can pick out a few houses that are still located there, but nothing.
And you talked about what your parents did for a living. Were there any interactions that your family had with the Cooperative Extension Service?
Not my family. My first experience with Extension was when I was in grade school and started with the 4-H.
And describe how that came to be.
Well, of course, they offered a 4-H program at the school, and I thought that'd be a good thing to do, so I became involved in that. And of course, some of the first things you do is you make an apron, and you make a dress, and you do maybe some canning or some things like that. But right away, I'll just be real honest, I began to see that my little stitches didn't always compare with other little stitches that may or may not have been totally made by little hands. And so there were some other programs. You could do timely speeches, as they called them, or you could do demonstrations. I didn't like the demonstrations because I had to depend on the other person to learn their part and to do it well. And that thing of I want to do it well was paramount in my mind. So I thought, I don't want to do this with somebody else because then I'm sort of dependent on what they will do. So I went to the timely speeches where I would do the presenting totally alone. And so I did a lot of that. And that was very beneficial because not only did it teach me how to write and how to prepare a speech and how to present things to people, but it gave me that opportunity to be before the public and to learn how to deal with that kind of a situation, which I think is extremely vital in young people's lives. It doesn't matter how much you know. If you cannot transmit that knowledge to other people, it goes nowhere. You have to either be able to write it or speak it or both. And so this was an opportunity that I felt was very important. And then another aspect came forth out of the 4-H. It was Share the Fun. I believe that's what they called it. And I have been singing since I was a little kid. I think the first song I ever sang was Pistol Packin' Mama, which everybody thought was pretty funny for about a 3-year-old to sing. And so I started singing as part of the Share the Fun thing and won lots of awards on that. And so that was another form of being before the public and learning to deal with that kind of an atmosphere, which I feel is vital. And as it proves later on in my life, this has been very important because I've done a lot of things through my years. I don't know how far back you want to go here or how much forward you want to go, but the 4-H was a very good foundation for me. That's the way I would put that. My parents were very supportive of it. I showed chickens once upon a time. My mother had buff monarchas. I took first place. You know why? Because there were only ones that were buff monarchas there. But that's okay. We had, I think it was 2 hens and a rooster you had to display.
Can you describe any of the 4-H meetings? Did they come to the school? Or?
They came to the school. I don't remember the people's names. That's been too many years ago. I have no idea. But they would come to the school and work with us there.
And you talk about being in public speaking. You talked about the type of speech called timely topics. Was that what it was
I think
called?
that's what it was called at the time, or timely speeches.
Timely speeches. And was that just developing a speech? How did that get that's name? Or
I don't know how the 4-H came up with the title of that, and I don't even remember if we were relegated to a particular topic. I think we probably were. That part I don't really remember. But you had to develop the speech, and then you had to get up before the crowd and deliver it.
It almost sounds like topics of that time.
Probably. I don't even remember what one of them might have been. But I do remember, and it had to be a time, a certain time limit. You couldn't run over a certain time. And so all of these things are very, they teach you a great deal that you're going to need later on. Even for interviews or any things of that nature, when you go for a job, these were things that, you could still take from it and apply. Now 4-H has those actual programs, which I'm glad to see. And I have had the opportunity to sit in on judging several of those kinds of things through the years.
And so how long were you in 4-H?
I was in 4-H from the time I was about I want to say maybe a 2nd grader or 3rd grader through about 7th grade.
Okay. Learned a great deal during that time, didn't you?
No, probably was more than that. I think it was probably even through, because I remember going to do the Share the Fun thing when I was probably at least an 8th grader.
Did you ever go on any trips outside the county?
No, never did.
And were there other county-wide, because each little community had their own 4-H club, were there any county events or activities that you participated in?
Not that I can recall. The other part of the extension that I recall with great memories, good memories, was my mother was in the Farm Women's Club. Of course, we don't call it that now. But since, as I said, she didn't drive, but she could drive from one farm over to another farm. And so in the summertime, since we lived way out in the country, and I was the last child, there were no kids to play with. But when she got to the club, as she called it, going to club, I got to go, and there would be other kids there. And it was usually, sometimes they would have a potluck dinner, lunch. Sometimes it was just dessert in the afternoon. Whatever it was, that was good. But the best part about it was I got to see other children and play with other children during the summer, which I would not have been able to do otherwise. You know, if some little kid came along with their dad, when the dad came to visit my dad about something, then we played for a few minutes. But generally speaking, all summer I was void of any little playmates. So you learn to ride the horse, take care of your newborn kittens, play with the puppy that you have, and I always had a playhouse. And I canned many, many green beans. Now these green beans were from catawba trees, but they worked. They looked like green beans.
So describe that. What's different? I've never heard that. I've never even heard of that tree.
It's a tree that blooms in the spring with a pretty blossom on it, and then it forms these long green beans on it. And so I always had a playhouse, and I had my own things set up, and I had my jars for canning, and I would snap those beans, fix those suckers, put them in those jars, and I would seal them just like my mother did, you know, making sure that it was properly sealed. Put them up on the shelf. Of course, after a while, they became pretty rancid, and my mother always got the job of cleaning out the jars. That was not my job. I mean, I canned them. She could clean them.
So that's something that had she learned that in club?
I think she probably learned that on her own.
On her own.
Yeah, she came, you know, they had farm and you know, they raised cattle and they raised hogs and had a garden and all this kind of thing. I don't know that she may have picked up some pointers as she went to the Farm Women's Club. It appeared to me as a child being more of a, they had their own little programs and things that they talked about, but it was more of a social issue than it was anything, to my way of thinking as a child. Now I'm sure they were learning many things that I didn't pick up on, but you know, I was more entranced with the children and the food.
It was their social event.
Right.
That was their.
And it was always a big deal to get to go to somebody else's house. And the women would work for days to get everything just so when they had the club, as it was called.
About how many women, do you remember about how many women would show up at one time?
Oh, I would say probably 10,
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 maybe, on a good event. I always hated it in the wintertime because I would be in school and I wouldn't get to go. But summertime, that was a good deal.
And after your high school, what did you do after high school?
I went to college at OSU, majored in business, have a degree in business, and not too long after that I was married, and my husband was in the military. He was a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And so we've moved all over the United States and half the world. And our daughter was born in California. Some years later, our son was born in Okinawa. And then we came back to the States, and my husband was killed in an aircraft accident. So I've been a widow for a number of years. God and I raised the children.
The joint venture.
But what a partner.
How did you end up back in Oklahoma?
After my husband was killed, we were living in Virginia when this happened. And we stayed there for a year. And then I knew that I didn't want to stay in Virginia. Oklahoma's home. And people said to me, why did you choose Oklahoma? I said, why not? And they're like, well, you have tornadoes there. I said, there is no utopia. You find a place where you're comfortable and where you want to put your roots down, and you make it work. I made it work in many, many places. We had made 21 major moves when we came back here. So every place became home. That's up to you, whether you make it home or not. Home is a family. Home is surround yourself with those you love, and don't dwell on the adversities, dwell on the positive. I mean, when we lived in Okinawa, this was during the wartime, the Vietnam War. My husband put in over 100 missions over North Vietnam during the heat of the war. And at night when you went to bed, he was flying missions. I'm carrying a baby. People said, I can't believe you're going to have another baby with all this circumstance. We had many people that was lost out of our squadron. They were either POWs, MIAs, or killed. And you're going to have a baby? I said, I'm not going to put my head in the sand. Life needs to go on. And if something happens, I'll have another piece of him. And we do.
So how many children did you have?
I have two.
Have two. What are their names and when were they born?
After they reach 21, I don't discuss their age.
Okay.
Solita is the daughter. She has a degree from OSU in veterinary medicine. She's married and has 4 children, the eldest of which has his degree in architecture from the University of Florida and has recently married. She has a daughter who's at the University of Florida, and she's working in the horticulture area combined with an area of working with people who are disabled in some fashion, either through stroke or perhaps from war issues or Alzheimer's or whatever it is, and they're incorporating horticulture into this aspect of this. They're creating a degree in this. And then the other child is very much an artist. And when I say that, that's not a grandmother speaking. She truly is extremely artistic and endowed with this gift. And she is going to be a senior this year. And she will be there in the high school in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Then the younger child, we wonder exactly where she's going to go. She's a child that expects perfection of herself and particularly enjoys things perhaps in an engineering field or perhaps as an astronaut or something of that nature. However, the other day she told us she might want to teach school, so we said, okay, fine. I've done that too. I've taught school. I've set up federally funded programs for emotionally disturbed children because my master's degree is in the field of applied behavioral science. And people have asked me, how does that work as a treasurer? I said, I probably use that area more than I do the business. Working with people is something you will do all of your life, whatever you do, wherever you go.
How did you make the decision to run for county treasurer?
Actually, I was hounded into it. People kept coming to me. I was at the university at the time, and I was working in the engineering energy lab. And I was working in the program. We were self-supported. And we recruited money from a 5-state area from utility companies. So I've been in the money world for quite a while. And I was really kind of getting tired of that and thought maybe I'd like to do something else. But I really hadn't made up my mind what. And I had looked at several fields within the university, but nothing really seemed to be jumping out at me. And I had some folks who came to me and said, we would like to have you run for the treasurer. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That's politics. And then it always comes back to, God, what do you want me to do? You surely don't want me to do that. And the answer came back, I do. So at the last minute, with no money, no experience, no anything that really would put you into the field of thinking you should do this, I signed up to run for county treasurer. I was in the party that was not popular at the time. I was running against an incumbent who had been in the area of the treasurer's office for 27 years and had served as treasurer for 1 term. And so coming forth with no money, no experience, no one knew me, you're asking yourself, what kind of a nut are you that you're going to try this? When God sends you, I don't think you ask questions.
What was that first campaign like?
Very interesting. I spent a great deal of time meeting and talking with people, and that's how I won the election. I had signs that we made homemade because I didn't have the money to buy anything else, and had people who would help support me with painting a few big signs and things like that. And I had people who were willing to go out and help me put up signs, which I did myself along with them, which I think made people understand that I was willing to work at something. I'm willing to step forth and get out of my comfort zone and do what needs to be done. And I walked and talked and met with people, and I had some goals that I felt should be met in this office. I never told anybody that it was a promise. I said I have goals, and these are my goals, and there were about 5 of them. And I made no bones about where I went. I mean, if a man was out on the tractor, I had on my shoes that I could walk in, and I walked out across the plowed field and I visited with him. I recall one day I went to a little town, and I saw this little room had a whole bunch of men in there, and they were playing dominoes and cards and whatever. And I thought, hey, I need to talk to this group of people. So I went in and I talked to them and passed out my little push cards and all this good stuff. And later I was told, one of them went home and told his wife, he said, you know, women never came in there. He said, but she got every vote that was in there. And it's one of those things where you don't let something stand in your way. I wasn't doing anything that was immoral or illegal. It was just people didn't normally go in there. Well, I didn't have sense enough to know I shouldn't go, so I went. And people would say, well, I'd love to vote for you, but my daddy was such and such, and he would just roll over in his grave if I voted for whatever, And I would say, how long has your father been deceased? Oh, about 40 years now. I said, oh, he'll enjoy the role. You had to learn to have some humor along with it. And I felt like God wanted me to do this. Now people said, well, you seem to be pretty satisfied that you're probably going to win. I said, no, I'm only satisfied that I'm supposed to run. God will take care of the rest of it. If it's to be, it'll be. So I won by about 65 votes.
65 votes?
And she asked for a recount. Would expect that.
Yeah.
And in the recount, I beat her by 197.
That'll teach her. So time frame wise, how long after you had moved back to the Stillwater area did you run for office?
We moved back in 1978, and I ran for office in 86. And in that interim, I operated a 360-acre ranch with cow-calf pairs. And my son and my daughter and I managed it. And we took care of whatever was necessary. We worked the cattle ourselves. We took care of the fences. We did whatever was necessary. And I even maintained that for a short time after I was elected. But it became evident that being the treasurer was a full-time job, that you're pretty much married to the job. And so if you're going to do a good job there, you can't be divided, feeding cattle and taking care of fences, or cow gets out or whatever's happened, or you need to pull a calf or whatever. It just wasn't going to work. So I did sell the cattle and made this job of being treasurer as a full-time position.
And so we talked a little bit earlier, how many election cycles have you gone through, and how many times have you had an opponent?
I believe I have this right, I believe this would have been the 8th term, and I have had one opponent. It was my first term after I unseated someone. Then the next term, a man ran against me and I beat him over 80%. And I've not had an opponent since.
That is pretty amazing.
I believe that the people realized that we were doing a good job. And I say we. It's not me, it's we. You're only as good as the staff that you have. You're only as good as the weakest link in the chain. And so I have a good staff. It's taken years of working, and I have one lady that's been with me almost as long as I've been there. But you treat people the way you'd like to be treated. You do the best you can to give them the best salary you can give them, which is not really a great salary in many cases. The county is not just overly flushed with money. And some of it is relegated by statute. In fact, my salary is regulated by the statutes. It's based on our evaluations. But there's more to a job than a salary. If people are comfortable with what they do and they feel like they have your support and you've got their back and you treat them with fairness and treat them the way you want to be treated, most of the time people will stay with you, because money's not the whole answer.
During that time that you've been the treasurer, how has that position changed, or the duties of that position, or the way it's handled?
Well, probably the fact that I brought computerization to it is the biggest change that has taken place. And serving the people in a way that they need to be served, such as when I first came in, they were not getting tax statements in a timely fashion. They were coming late in the year, and checks were not being deposited in a timely fashion. All these kinds of things are just part of the operation of the office that should have been going on all along. Probably the biggest change of all would be the computerization. And that was an absolute nightmare, because at that point in time, computerization for counties was pretty limited. And we went with a computer program at that time that served the clerk, the assessor, and the treasurer. And to be very honest, there wasn't a program for the treasurer. It was kind of a bare bones. So we pretty much helped to build that one, and it was still never really satisfactory. So we moved to another program, which was pretty good. And it became prohibitive in cost, because the man that was running it had some idea that he was going to make his entire living off of 2 counties. And when I said, I'm sorry, I can't afford you anymore, he said, you can't live without me. Not a good idea to tell someone they can't live without you. So we left him and we went to another computer company, which some aspects of it were good, other aspects were very, very poor. So I got rid of it after a point in time, and we have one now that I am extremely pleased with, that is constantly in process of making it better, looking for new and better ways to streamline it or to tweak it so that it works better, but it's a great program now. And it makes our work and our whole lives so much more simplified and accurate, and we can produce things for people that they really want and need that we could never do before.
What is the name of that program?
It's the TM Consulting. It originated with a man by the name of Tom Martins, and it's out of Enid. Okay. He developed it himself over a number of years. When I first heard about him, he only had a small portion of the program. And as years have gone on, he's developed the whole thing. And the man developed it himself, so it's not like, well, Harry did this and Mary did that and Johnny did something else and now they're all gone and we don't know why they did it or how they did it. You can call the man if he's driving down the road and tell him, I've got a problem over here in such and such a section, and he will tell you what to do to fix it.
Do you know any idea about how many counties in Oklahoma use that program?
Probably in the neighborhood of 40.
That's interesting. I've never even heard of that.
TM Consulting, Tom Martins.
So what is his background? Did he come from a county treasurer's position?
No. I don't really know what his, I imagine his major was probably in the computer field. He has one other gentleman that works with him primarily, and then he's added, I think, a couple more just recently that do some auxiliary work, I would say. They don't do the actual programming and that sort of thing. But his programs are excellent. And I think if I were to tell my staff I'm taking it out, they'd probably say, goodbye, I'm leaving.
That's the sign of a good program.
Yes, it is.
That's nice to hear.
I have no problem tooting his horn.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty careful about whose horn I toot. Because I think when you tell somebody something, it's like going to a restaurant and you say, boy, that food was just great. You need to kind of follow it up. We went to a place in Texas just recently called Babe's. Now there are several Babes across Texas. I ate at the one in Carrollton. Excellent. I can't guarantee you that the one in Fort Worth or the one in Dallas is as good as the one in Carrollton because it's not the same chef. So I'm pretty careful about who I give a real plus to, but I will give a real plus to this computer company. They're none of them cheap, but he's not any more expensive than those ones that we had previously that were an absolute disaster in some cases.
So, talking about the Cooperative Extension Service and their county government education program, what has been your involvement over the years? When did you
That's where we need to go back to where I first ran. I didn't know anything about, as I said, I had no experience in this field. Yes, I had 2 degrees, and I've done a lot of things. I've taught in juvenile detention centers. I've taught as a substitute teacher. I've taught in regular schools. I've set up federal programs for emotionally disturbed. I've done all these kinds of things, but I had never had any real experience in the field of being a treasurer for a county. So the first thing that came to my mind was, I wonder if OSU has anything to offer. And so that's when I went to Dr. Jim Shamlin, who started the program, as far as I know. He and I think someone else, but he's the one that I recognized and knew. And I said, Dr. Jim, and oddly enough, he had my son in one of the classes in college. And I said, I need some help here. And so they were able to give me some, some information, brochures, pamphlets, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't have quite as full-blown a program as they have now, but they could give me what they had. And it was my first experience with that. And then when I became the treasurer, then I learned that, my goodness, you have a school that teaches people how to do this. And I have to say, and this is probably going to sound a little bit calloused or really inappropriate in some ways, the first few meetings that I went to where all county officers were involved, I was actually stunned at some of the inappropriate, they just really didn't seem to know their business as well as I thought they should have. Even when they got up to speak, they were just void of the ability to, maybe be the best leaders that they could be and so forth. And as time went on and we began to learn, OSU has programs that will teach you how to be a better commissioner, or or how to be a better sheriff, or how to be a better treasurer, etc., on down the line. And I thought, my goodness, I hope some of these people start going there. Not that I thought I was so endowed with knowledge myself. I knew I needed to learn things, but I could certainly see a need. And over the years, I have watched this program grow, and I have watched the people that have been involved in this from other county offices as well as treasurers that have certainly profited from this. And they have become much more professional, much more able to convey their thoughts and ideas and convince other people and just be better at their jobs all the way around because of their experiences and teachings that they have had through OSU's programs.
And what, when you talked about the benefits, is there any way to put a financial?
I don't know that you can actually put a financial figure on something like that, except that I would say this, that some of the people who have lost their positions through elections probably lost them to people because they didn't avail themselves of some of the teachings that were offered to them that could have made them better at their jobs, which may have enabled them to have kept their jobs.
And so have you taken, has your involvement with that program grown? Has your role changed?
I don't know that my role has changed. I mean, my job of being the treasurer is still the same, and the rules and the regulations that govern it are pretty much the same. But it certainly has given me an opportunity to fine-tune it, let's put it that way, as I've done my job. Also, I work with OSU in teaching. I'm often asked to come and be a part of teaching different courses in the treasurer's capacity. And as you teach, you also learn. And I feel like that we, have worked as partners in that to help make, and I'll just speak for treasurers, to make better treasurers. Because most people, when they come into these jobs, really don't know very much about it. Let's just face it. I'll go back to the making of the pies. The most I knew about the treasurer's office when I first took over was what I could glean from law books and what I could get from OSU to teach me what was going on there. But still, you need that experience, that hands-on opportunity. And so when you go to these classes and things that are there for OSU, not only do they teach you, but you have the opportunity to exchange ideas with other treasurers, or to have things brought out that, well, I didn't know I should do that, or I didn't know I shouldn't do that. And things are brought out and discussed that helps you to be well-rounded in what you're trying to do. And you can go not only to the treasurer's course as a treasurer, I can go to the clerk's course. I can become a better partner with the clerk, or a better partner with the assessor, or just a better partner with all of the workings of this whole county, whether it be the sheriff, the commissioners, or the excise board, or whatever area it is. It gives you an opportunity to learn more about all these other offices, which makes you a better partner as you work with the other people.
That's interesting. I thought that the way you talked, that perhaps you had taken on the role of being a team teacher, or...
Annie Embry has asked me many times to work with her on these things, particularly in the field of where we do sales because of people's failure to pay their taxes. We call it resale. It's a very crucial and critical area within our office. You're literally taking people's property from them for failure to pay taxes. And there's so much to know about it in order to handle it properly and to be fair to all concerned. And so she frequently calls on me to work with her in that particular category. And she'll often call me to just present things as the whole role of being the treasurer.
Dr. Lansford talked about a county government video that they had made a few years ago. Did you have a role in that? Did you
Yes.
play a part in that?
Yes.
What was your role in that?
Well, they just asked different questions about, the aspects of the treasurer's office. I don't remember specifics, but it was just more in a generality than it was in a specific.
I think that's been extremely popular, the use of that.
And they also make videos. They come to the offices and they make videos of different areas within our office, and then they incorporate that. We, the treasurers, and I'm going to talk about treasurers, we the treasurers have written the handbook for treasurers. Who better to write the book than the people who implement these things, use these things on a daily basis? And then we are guided by the statutes, and of course OSU has been good about pairing all of this information with the statutes so that you have the laws to back what you're doing and how you're doing it. So every office, whether it be the clerks or whether it be the treasurers, the sheriff, the commissioners, OSU has been able to put together, you know, the guidelines for this and make it into, we have our own tapes and things of this nature, not tapes, but the CDs. Mm-hmm. And if you want to run it off in hard copy, you can. And I'm kind of one of these people, I kind of like to see something in print, in hard copy. So I print things off, and you know, I have right now the lady that's going to take my position, and I have her working with me. And so she has already tapped into OSU as I directed her to get with them, let's get this going, you know, and you can have all this to teach and train you. And then when she comes up with questions, then she can come to me and say, I don't quite understand this, you know, explain this to me. And I think all of these things, OSU has been vital in helping to teach and enable the different elected officials to grow into being the best elected officials they can be if they will go and participate in it.
It's a wonderful legacy for the state of Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I don't know of any, I don't know, maybe there are other states who do this, but county people we're the grassroots of government. We're where the rubber meets the road, as the old expression goes. We're the ones who look the people right in the eye. And you need to know what you're doing when you do that. And you need to give these people that you work with, your constituents, you need to give them the security that you know your business and that you're going to treat them in a fair and honorable way, that you'll follow the law. People sometimes get mad at you, you know, well, I don't think I should do this, well, that's the law. Well, I don't think that's a good law. I said, well, you know, if you wish to change it, then you need to work with your legislators, but until it's changed, that's the way it'll be, and we're going to enforce that law. And we're going to enforce it fairly across the board. I don't say, well, I like this guy, so I'm not going to do much with him. I don't care about her, so I'm going to really, you know, stick it to her. No, it needs to be across the board. You need to know your business. You need to know what you're doing and know how to do it, and do it fairly and honorably to all that you meet with. Whether they're paying you 25 cents or 25,000, it makes no difference. And OSU is good at helping prepare each of these officers, whether it's treasurers, clerks, sheriffs, whatever, if the people will go and attend the classes. You can't come out of there without learning. And like I said, not only it's what OSU offers you in teaching you, but it's the camaraderie that you have with others who bring forth issues. And you go, oh, I never had that happen. Oh my goodness, I'm glad they told me about that. Now I'll know what to do whenever that happens in my county. And sooner or later, you'll probably have some of these issues pop up.
Dr. Lansford talked about having some webinars and some
Yes.
face-to-face. And he said that during the face-to-face, as beneficial as the somewhat formal presentation was the ability of the peers
That's right.
get together and talk.
It's that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because people bring forth things that have happened in their county that hasn't happened in yours yet. Hang on. You know, sooner or later, last week, I had at least 3 things that have never occurred before. And I thought my new lady's sitting there and she's like, oh my word. She said, well, how do you know what to do? Well, you have to base it, first of all, on the law. You have to go back to the law always. Is it within the parameters of the law? Then the second thing is sometimes you have to just use some common sense. And the old expression, fly by the seat of your pants. There will never be a book or a program or anything that will be written large enough and encompassing enough to cover everything that you're going to encounter. Think of raising children. Will there ever be a book on parenting that will cover everything? Of course not. And so that's the same story here. But if you've had at least the opportunity to hear the basics, and then you've had the opportunity to interact with other people, and you go to these programs, each one of these programs offers something of specialty to you. But there's an overlapping too, because while you're in this program it's teaching you about one thing, something else will come up and people will bring it up, and then you know that becomes an issue that you can sort of beat around and talk about. And OSU is always good about if they don't have an answer for you, and nobody has every answer, they'll say, we'll get back with you on that. And that's what it's all about. people call me sometimes with things, and I don't always have a complete answer, but I'll get back with you, and do get back with them.
You talked earlier about the county treasurers getting to have a part and playing a large role, in fact the main role in writing that county treasurer's handbook.
Mm-hmm.
So what process, how was that a committee? Was it an online document? What process was followed to write that handbook?
Well, we had a handbook of sorts when I first came in.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually, and that came through Dr. Jim Shamlin's operations there of putting it together. But through the years, we've always had in our I'll speak of the treasurers, and I think every other office has their own. We have an advisory group that gets together, and we talk about these things. And we have Judy Rudin has always worked with us really big on working up the handbooks and things of that nature. And she would say, okay, I want certain people's within this advisory group, you take chapters 2 through 3, whatever. Bonita, you take chapters 7 through 8. And get back with me, go over this and see if it's following the statutes and what we have written here, is it right? Is this the right way to do this? So it's been a composite of people working together to make it the best we can do, following the statutes and then giving the interpretation of what does this really mean and how do you handle this, and maybe even examples if necessary. Also AG's opinions. If you have case law or something that may be applicable to these things, then that's included.
AG's Attorney General?
Attorney Generals, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anything else that you've seen historically through the years with this program? Any other changes? Or?
Just a complete, I think, just a very different group of people who have profited from being involved in part of these programs. I won't say that's the whole thing, of course not, but it has made a direct impact on the quality of the people that we have in county government across the state.
They know what they're doing.
They're being taught, they're learning, and they're really realizing that even courses like Judy Rudin taught a course on public speaking, a great course, because people do have, a lot of people just have a real fear about getting up there, and so it helps them when they're campaigning, of course. But more than that, you need to be able to speak to your constituents in a manner that is appropriate and reflects your knowledge and your ability to handle a situation. If someone comes in and talks to you and you act like you don't know what you're talking about because you just can't get it out to them, you've lost them. They don't have any confidence in you.
Sounds like the program goes beyond just that base knowledge.
It does. That's what I'm saying. It goes into things like, it's a broad-based program that teaches you many things. It teaches you about what is the actual whole setup of the county. How does it work? What is, how, like I said, even with how does the excise board work? How do other agencies work that are subsidiaries of the county? Fair boards, all kinds of things. I mean, they have such a broad scope of knowledge that you could not possibly go to these programs without coming out with a great deal of knowledge. They teach you how to use the statute books. A lot of people, you hand you a statute book and they go, well, what do I do with this thing? Now we have things online, I understand that. But still, you need to be able to know even how to research it. How do I find that I need? Well, I need to know about such and such. Well, where do I find that? Where is it listed? How is it listed? So they teach such a broad base of things. Anybody could profit from it, but specifically people who are in the county government, and they need to be going to the courses. If you can get your deputies to go, that's good too. It's difficult sometimes to get the deputies because they're small numbers in our counties. Lots of counties do not have a large number, and it's hard to pull people from those positions to go to a school for a day or two. But if you're not going to do that, then the way I handle it is when I go to a school, I come back and share with the people, specifically if it's dealing with certain areas, with whether it's apportionment or whether it's for-mill or whether it's the tax collections as far as notification, whatever it is. The people who specifically work with that, I go to them and share with them any new information that we have. And I think, other counties can do that too, even if the people can't go. And once in a while you need to send them, whether you think you can send them or not, because it does a twofold thing. First of all, it gives them the feeling I'm important. I need to go to this. And my job is important, and I need to learn. And when they're there, they're going to learn. And when they're there, they're also going to hear other deputies talk, and they're going to come back with, hey, I learned something from, did you know such and such happened? If nothing else, maybe they'll come back and say, wow, I'm sure glad I worked for you. Things work in better. You can make a good thing happen out of a lot of things.
Ms. Stadler, I can fully understand why you've been so successful in this career, why you've only had one opponent. That makes perfectly good sense.
Like I said, let me go back and thank my staff too. It's not a me, it's a we. It's a we.
I understand that. Any last things that you'd like to share before we end our interview?
I cannot remember what I was asked to write about. I can't remember the award that was going to be presented, and it's probably within the last year. But I wrote an article for the program and for Dr. Lansford. He did not ask it. It was asked by other people. But I have always given them, and I've gone to the legislatures, I've gone to the different committee meetings that have occurred, and I've always stood up and explained as best I could the importance of this program, because it is vital. And like I said, I can see the difference in the people, the quality of the people. It does make a difference if you attend.
Do you think if this program had been in effect in the early 80s, we would have had the county commissioner scandal?
No, I do not. A lot of that was due to ignorance, and a lot of people were punished maybe severely for something that was very minor, and I think that happened. The bottom line is you can't do that. But I think people didn't even realize. My own father came up to where my ranch was at the time, and the road into it was really rough. He said, you need to get the county commissioners out here to straighten this road out, smooth this road out for you. And I said, Dad, this is private property. And he said, so? It's in the county, isn't it? I said, Dad, that's not something. He said, well, I didn't know that was illegal. There you go. And a lot of those kinds of things happened. It's not that they were bad people. Some of them were, yes. There can always be a rotten apple in the barrel. We know that, whether it's pastors, politicians, lawyers, teachers, whatever it is. No place is totally free of someone who wants to do the wrong thing. But generally speaking, I think most people do things out of ignorance, more so than out of deliberate intentions.
I would agree.
So, and we've all done things, and I will have to admit that when I first came in office, it was like, what, I can't do that? What made perfect sense as an individual that I could do that, but I couldn't do it as an elected official within the parameters of the law. And so that's why these people need to be there. They need to be learning this. And as I said before, you can watch until doomsday, but you've got to have the experience. And once you get into these avenues and you start working on it, you go, man, I don't know too much about this. I better go get a little help. Are they going to keep you totally out of trouble? Probably not, because we can get our own trouble pretty easily. But they're certainly going to give you a heads up, folks. You better be thinking before you do some of these things. Purchasing is an area that is really, really vital, because all of us purchase. You have to. You have to purchase things. I mean, that's part of the deal. You better know how to do it, and to do it right, and do it legally.
Ms. Stadler, we wish you first a happy retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you for your many years of public service.
Thank you. It's been my privilege, really.
And one last question, what will your immediate plans after retirement be?
Well, I've had many things on a back burner. So first of all, I will take care of my own private life and things that I need to do there. And as I said, I have land down in Logan County that I do haying on. I need to address some issues there. I have about 6 acres that I take care of here in Payne County, plus 40 acres that I take care of. So there's plenty to do in the just physical work area. Then I'm going to see more of my children, and I'm going to do some more traveling. And then I will do whatever the Lord points me to do.
It'll be good.
He pointed me here.
He's not done yet.
He'll point me where he wants me to go. And I hope I'll be smart enough to take his lead.
We wish you all the best.
I thank you for having me.
Thank you.